Yo, what's going on, Epic 7 fam? I'm Sue, and last season I did a turn 2 cheat sheet in order to help as many people as possible hit Masters in World Arena so that they could get their Lionheart Cermia skin. That video was incredibly well received, so I decided I would do it again this season for the Pursuit season. That way I could help as many of you out there get your Pirate Captain Flan skin. The meat and potatoes of this video is going to be focused on turn 2 / standard play because that is what I primarily play. And I feel like it is the easiest for me to explain in a very consolidated and concise manner. That said, if you are a fast or aggressive player like a cleaver, I didn't want you to click off the video having nothing and leaving empty-handed. So on your screen right now is a more advanced and comprehensive draft flowchart that kind of details, I think, all of the units that are viable for all playstyles in this format, or at least the very best ones. There's a couple of fringe ones that I left out here, but for the most part, it should contain almost everybody, give you some ideas of what's actually good. Take a screenshot of it and refer to it throughout your drafts. It should make things a bit easier. One thing I should note though, characters on this tier list are not organized by power level. They are organized alphabetically by rarity. So for example, you'll see all of the 5 stars A to Z, followed by all the 4 stars A to Z, and then the 3 stars, so on and so forth. All right? Now, for the rest of you that are out there, we are going to be using this tier list, which is got a lot less units on it and is much simpler to follow, right? I wanted to make this as easy and painless as possible because I know a lot of people in the community really hate World Arena. I decided to go with a plug and play flowchart, right? 4 easy tiers here, right? Your first picks, your second picks, your ban protection slot, and then your 4th / 5th pick counter picks, right? That's pretty much it. You'll see underneath each of the picks here, for first pick, it says carry or opener, and you'll see there is a list that corresponds to each of these categories, right? Tank or supports for second pick, so you could take from either this 3rd row here with Empyrean Ilynav, or this 4th one here with Designer Lilibet. Again, it's designed to give you a powerful draft, so that way you could get your skin as easy as possible, knowing absolutely nothing about the format, right? Just listen to some of the pointers that I have for specific characters to know when to pick them, and you are good to go. Before we actually jump into why you want to play specific characters, along with some example builds for each of them, 2 quick reminders. Number 1, if you're not already, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's free, it costs you nothing, and it's the best way to support a small content creator like me. It lets YouTube know that you really appreciate content like this and helps me continue to bring more content like this to you in the future, say for the next World Arena season. Speaking of the World Arena season, it ends on Friday, December 13th. Yes, I know the notification says December 14th, but for most global players, that is Friday night, December 13th. It's going to be like 7 or 8 p.m. PST, 10 or 11 p.m. EST. And for those of you in Europe, it's going to be somewhere around like, I want to say 3 a.m. in the middle of the night, Friday into Saturday. For those of you who watch me from the Asia servers, that's going to be essentially Saturday morning for you. So please keep that in mind. A lot of people seem to think that it ends Saturday night. It does not end Saturday night. It ends next Friday, right? Not this Friday as I'm recording this video, but next Friday, December 13th, right? You need to make sure that you're above Masters to get the skin and play at least 1 match and maintain that Masters rating in the last 72 hours. All right, got it? Good. Let's jump into the actual tiers here. All right, to reiterate, in case it wasn't really obvious, this is a plug and play list here. You essentially, for your first pick in the draft, pick either a carry or an opener from this list. A carry being a character that is strong enough to 1v4 or just is in general very OP and runs away with the game. An opener is a fast character that can kind of disable your opponent's team or essentially kind of prevent them from running away with the game, prevent them from kind of speeding up and going out of control. This is very important for turn 2 players, even if you don't have a lot of speed gear. Just the threat that you could have a fast New Moon Luna or a fast Sea Phantom Politis makes people play very differently. If you take slow characters, people just seem to think, oh, I can just speed up, play very aggressively, and run over you. So having at least 1 character that you can mind game like this is a very powerful thing to do. Second pick is tanks or supports, right? This is essentially a character that kind of facilitates your strategy or, again, prevents your opponent from doing something like picking a very aggressive character on 2. You could use a reviver to kind of counter in case they kill a specific hero, or you take like a cleanser to prevent them from taking a debuff. Somebody that's like generically powerful, like maybe a Mediator Kawerik, that is also a very good cleanser to begin with. Now, This next spot here, third pick, band protection. This is the most important spot in the entire draft. If you have the first pick overall, you'll be the first person to take a character in third pick slot. You want to take a core unit. This is essentially somebody who is the pillar of one of the most powerful strategies in the format and can completely warp a game around it. Somebody that essentially will carry you to victory, right? Now, if you're second pick and you are looking to take somebody in third pick band protection, you can also take a core unit here for your strategy. You know, somebody like maybe Bloodblade Karin, for example. Or you could take a really powerful counter pick from any of these tiers here down below that kind of lock out your opponent's strategy. For example, if your opponent has taken a bunch of counter units to start, you could put somebody like Mort in that kind of counter pick tier here under band protection and just lock out that counter strategy. I leave it to you. You kind of have to make a judgment call, play a couple of games, get a feel for it. But that is essentially the two things you want to be doing at all times with your third pick band protection. And in the last two picks, regardless of whether or not you are first or second pick, you just want to be picking generically powerful characters that answer the things your opponent has already picked, or obviously exploit a weakness. So if your opponent, for example, has not actually drafted any cleansers, this is the time to take characters like, say, Death Dealer Ray or Silverblade Araminta. Cool. Understand how we're drafting now? Let's explain why we are taking the characters that we are in each of the rows, starting with the carry tier. And the first one here is going to be Empyrean Ilynav. If you have Empyrean Ilynav, it is paramount that you build her. She is the highest win rate character currently on ladder. She basically does everything. She has built-in lifesteal, built-in injury, can carry a game with her damage by herself, gives your team extra tankiness, has a cleanse, gets a ton of combat readiness to boot, and also gives you that very valuable defense penetration resist, making it very difficult for your opponent to run you over with certain characters like Jenua, for example. Also very good against Last Rider Krau, who is a commonly played character. Ilynav is incredible if you have her. I think overall, she is the best #1 pick. It's between her and the next character that we're going to talk about, which is Afternoon Soak Flan. Afternoon Soak Flan is perhaps generically the most powerful damage dealer in the format besides Bloodblade Karin. Due to her powerful dual attacks and 100% dodge chance from her passive, she can very easily run away with a game. She is a must pick or must ban character in my opinion. If for some reason you do have to fight her, make sure you have a solid game plan, whether that's drafting a hero like Solitaria of the Snow or Sea Phantom Politis under ban protection to hinder her passive, or just getting really creative with heroes like Melissa and her curse debuff. After that, we come to New Moon Luna, and just like her figure, Luna is pretty and backbreaking. AoE Seal completely allows you to run away with the game if your opponent has no answer to it, and her skill 2 has insane synergy with the artifact Etika's Scepter. By the way, just because Luna can be fast doesn't mean you need to actually build her fast to be effective. I feel like this is a very common misconception amongst the player base. She is incredible even at low speeds when paired alongside Harsetti, so don't be afraid to pick her early because she's good in both types of gameplay. After that, we come to Last Rider Krau, who is the most generically useful mitigation knight right now in my opinion. His skill 3 mobile weapon Siegfried, reducing cooldowns, allows you to constantly reuse skills from heroes like Ruele of Light or Hellion Lua to frustrate your opponents. He's not very good though into Empyrean Ilynav or Blood Moon Haste, so do keep that in mind. The last character in this tier is Dragon Bride Senya, who is the tankiest hero in the game. She is someone who can protect your damage dealers that you draft in your third pick band protection slot. Simply just slot them in the back slot, and if they try to mess with your carry, you get a powerful AoE nuke that can kill a lot of squishy teams. Keep in mind though that she's really bad into Empyrean Ilynav, which is why she is here as last in this tier. Anyways, with the carries out of the way, let's talk about the openers. We've already touched on New Moon Luna, so let's move right on to Sea Phantom Politis. This is a great character for you to take if you're someone who likes to play just a little bit more aggressive. Politis' passive makes her very hard to interact with due to the fact that she's always stealth, and it also reduces your opponent's focus and fighting spirit gain. She also has an AoE buff strip, and it enrages your entire team, making her great with characters like Jenua and ambitious Tywin. It also doubles as a guaranteed dual attack, making her function kind of similar to Conqueror Lilias. The best thing about taking C-Fan and Politis early as a turn 2 player is that your opponent might be too scared to pick fast units because they don't know that you don't have great top speed. And also, you won't have to face her either, so that's a bonus. Next up, we have Hellion Lua, who is incredible after her buffs, especially when paired with heroes like Last Rider Krau or Laia. This essentially allows you to easily lock the team by constantly reducing your team's skill cooldowns. Designer Lilibet and Mort do give her a bit of trouble, but she wins versus a lot of other cleansers and team compositions. I should also add that she is much stronger when you draft her in the 3rd pick ban protection than early as an opener. And the final character in this tier here is going to be Zeo. Zeo signals, if you take him in the first 2 picks of a draft, that you're trying to cleave, so do keep that in mind. The main reason that he's in this tier is because if your opponent takes something like Rand first pick, that is somebody that Zeo can actually tag with his S3, right? They're not stealth. He can be a pretty powerful deterrent. He can basically force your opponent to stop trying to cleave you. Otherwise, I think he is significantly stronger as a core unit, and we'll talk more about its applications later on in this video. Now we move on to the tanks. We've already talked about Empyrean Ilynav, Last Rider Krau, and Dragon Bride Senya, so we won't be talking about them here again. Instead, let's move on to Ambitious Tywin, who is an incredible tank that doubles as a control win condition thanks to his skill 3 flash being an AoE stun and defense break. He also has some cleansing capability due to his S2 passive Battle Command. The only real drawback to Tywin at the moment is that Last Rider Krau and Designer Lilibet are in pretty much every match, and he has a really hard time with both of those. So if you don't see those, he might actually be the best overall knight, the strongest knight overall when those characters are not in the game. Next up, we move on to Crimson Armin, who is basically going to be the budget pick for tank for most people watching this video if you don't have a lot of these specific Moonlight 5 stars. She provides by far the most amount of damage mitigation, but it comes at the cost of having a hero that has very low game impact outside of that passive. Her turns almost feel like they don't even matter. Still, most tanks in this format are absolute garbage versus Empyrean Ilynav, so Crimson Armin being one that isn't too bad against her is kind of a blessing. Next up, we come to, in my opinion, the most criminally underrated character in this tier in Yulha. I think she's incredible after her buffs. She reflects 40% of the damage that she sustains back at the attacker, making her an amazing wall against cleave and other hyper-aggressive strategies. Her matchup versus Last Rider Krau is also incredibly good. The only issue I think that she has is that she's terrible against Empyrean Ilynav, who is the dominant character in the current format. And to round out this section, we have Red Lilias, because I wanted another budget tank in the sea of broken ML5s that not everyone has access to. Surprisingly, Red Lilias has done an amazing amount of work for me this season. I have her built as an Aureus Knight on the lifesteal exclusive equipment. Picking her early into Empyrean Ilynav gives me a knight who isn't totally terrible against Empyrean Ilynav, offers me a cleanse with her skill 3, and can also double as a basic attack from some of my best carries. The number of times I've won with this character with and against Harsetti, by the way, is far higher than I'd like to admit. After the tanks, let's move on now to the supports, starting with Designer Lilibet, the winner of the most recent balance patch and arguably the best cleanser in the format. She provides your team with amazing tempo and can set up your team for a lot of kills. She's great versus most aggro setups and even good versus slower teams like Harsetti. She has a hard time carrying solo though, and when your opponent drafts very little if any debuffs, because then she doesn't really get that tempo. Make sure you bring a carry alongside of her so that way she doesn't have to carry the game all by herself. After that, we have Laia, the former OP first pick from a couple of seasons ago. She is one of the best cleansers of the format, especially against New Moon Luna, and she pairs incredibly well with Last Rider Krau. That is a very powerful one pick, two pick combination. These two together let you tempo out a ton of skills and completely run over your opponent. As long as your opponent doesn't have injury on their team, Laia is a very safe and reliable pick in the second slot. After that, we come to Ruele of Light, my favorite Soul Weaver in the game, and an incredible support whose only real drawback is that she struggles versus high tempo teams with a lot of AoE damage. This is because she can only really single target heal outside of her very overcosted soul burn. If your opponent's team is very slow and steady with not a lot of burst damage, Ruele will outlast them and make it incredibly frustrating for your opponent to kill anyone else on her team besides her first. She is amazing if you have a specific hero you want to protect, especially in tandem with Dragon Bride Senya. After Ruele, we come to Blood Moon Haste, who's pretty much exactly the same story as Ruele, except he's even more backbreaking than her, I feel, when he's actually very good. His matchup into heroes like Last Rider Krau, for example, just incredible. You should almost always win that matchup, assuming that you don't run into one of his few bad matchups, those being characters like Harsetti, Mort, and Ilynav. If your opponent has those heroes, right, it's going to be a bit rough. But if they don't have them, or you have those heroes, picking him honestly feels like cheating. After Haste, we have Conqueror Lilias, aka Old Reliable. I wouldn't really consider her an opener in this format because, well, there are a lot stronger openers, and also most supports can kind of stop her and out-tempo her. But that doesn't change the fact that she is still a very powerful character with a lot of very useful tools. If the game drags on for a very long time, the value you accrue with Conqueror Lilias cannot be ignored. If you play her on Laia's artifact, Sweet Miracle, she's also incredibly potent at regaining tempo and getting a foothold against aggressive drafts that are trying to lock you down, such as Hellion Lua. And the final support in this tier is Mediator Kawerik, aka Hand Guy. He is basically your budget version of Designer Lilibet. If she's taken or banned, or you simply just don't have Designer Lilibet, Mediator is still a great pickup in this format. Me personally, I like him a little bit better than her versus Harsetti, but that is just me. Still a fine support overall. Now we move on to the core units in the third pick band protection tier. These are the ones that you base your entire strategy around, the most important heroes probably in the entire format. First up is Afternoon Soak Flan, who we've already talked about. If for some reason she's fallen this far in the draft, I think it would be a good time to pick her up. Otherwise, let's move on now and talk about perhaps the character of the format. I'm of course talking about the big bad herself, Harsetti. Her passive, the Law of Skugiheim, completely changes the way that you have to think about Epic 7. It forces everyone to play at her level of speed. If your opponent is going fast, taking Harsetti here under ban pick protection should completely flip the script on them and give you a massive advantage. Just like with Afternoon Soak Flan, Harsetti is a must pick or must ban character. You should have dedicated counters in your reserve to fighting her. This includes a lot of slow or base speed counter pick heroes such as Blue Elena, Angel of Light Angelica, or Bloodblade Karin. After that, we move on to Zio, who we've already talked about, but I want to expand upon him a little bit more because I think he is significantly better under the third pick ban protection slot. Having Zio under your third pick protection is the best way for you to transition from being a slow turtle in a matchup to the aggressor. It's very easy for you to take Zio on third pick, followed by somebody like Requiem Rowana, Jacko Valentine, Silverblade Araminta, or Eternal Wanderer Ludwig, and there are several others as well. You want a character that has some way to combat range push themselves. This allows you to kind of become a pocket cleaver or like an aggro flex player, which is a very, very powerful thing and should win a lot of games. You don't need any BS 280 plus speed heroes with this strategy, just a bunch of base speed or 230 to 240 speed units plus Zio himself. Next up is Bloodblade Karin, who is the budget DPS of the format in my opinion, and probably the easiest way for you to climb the ladder and lock in that master's rank to get the skin. A Bloodblade Karin that is well built, especially if it has high effect resistance, is a force that can run over just about every single team composition in the metagame. She is excellent in fast teams, she is amazing in slow teams. She is very easy to acquire, very easy to build, and is a character I think everyone should have access to in their roster, as well as have some kind of answer to deal with. After Bloodblade Karin comes Hellion Lua, who we already talked about. Just to reiterate, this character, when taken with Laia or Last Rider Krau, is one of the most dominant strategies of the format. It's amazing in Legend rank as I'm recording this video. After that, we come to Jenua, who is an amazing single target DPS. He's not as good as Afternoon Soak Flan or Bloodblade Karin as your generic carry, but he's still incredible, right? As long as you are playing against heroes like Last Rider Krau or Designer Lilibet, he gives you an amazing advantage, doubly so if you have Dragon Bride Senya paired with him. He's pretty terrible though versus Empyrean Ilynav, who turns off his defense penetration, and surprisingly, Immortal Wukong's pretty good against him too. And finally, to round out the core units, we have Abyssal Yufine, who's perhaps the weakest hard carry in the slot, but she's still very, very good. Abyssal Yufine's main selling points are her ease of use, her relative tankiness, and her passive that cuts down combat readiness, which makes her good versus more aggressive drafts. She's pretty garbage though into Harsetti, so make sure you don't take her when you suspect your opponent may counter with that character. Our last category is the top tier counter picks, the creme de la creme, the easiest ones also to build. These are the ones I think are most broadly accessible to most players. The other counter picks that are here, you see there's quite a number of them, and if I decided to talk about all of them, it would take up a ton of time in the video. If you want to learn how to play these characters, feel free to either leave a comment down below and I'll kind of explain to you very quickly how the character is actually used. Check out Hero Library, link down below, or simply join the Discord. There's over 1,000 people in my Discord. They will be willing to help you if you ask questions, or you can just simply DM me, and if I have the time, I will also try to help you out. Again, this is just to keep the video length short, so instead, let's move on now and talk about the top tier counter picks category, starting with Death Dealer Ray as well as Schniel. I'm going to talk about both of these characters at the same time because they have a very powerful song and dance back and forth between the two of them. Death Dealer Ray is, in terms of raw power level, in my opinion, a top 3 to top 5 character still in this format. He pretty much wins most games on the spot, assuming your opponent isn't cleaving you and doesn't have Celine, Dragon King Sharoon, or Schniel. Schniel is such an effective answer to Death Dealer Ray that you cannot afford to pick Death Dealer Ray any earlier than the 4th pick, right? He's so good, has probably the 2nd highest win rate overall. That should tell you how effective he is. If you take Ray early and your opponent reveals Sharoon plus Schniel together, you basically lose the game on the spot unless you get very fancy or your opponent just doesn't really have good gear and you gear gapped him in the first place. If Death Dealer Ray is available, you should always be looking to take him as late as possible in the draft, especially if your opponent hasn't already drafted a cleanser. If you make it through the draft with him and your opponent doesn't have a good cleanser or answer to him, the game should basically be over and you win that game very easily on the spot. If you see Death Dealer Ray, then you should probably take Schniel because again, it is a force ban, pretty much an insta-win if they allow you to keep that character. Next up, we move on to Auntie Celine, and Celine's job is fairly simple. She's there to put the fear of God into your opponent and dares them to press a non-attack skill. If they decide to, she should very easily kill a character on the enemy team, possibly even 2 if she cuts and takes a turn afterwards and has access to her soulburn. You want to build her nuclear damage on the stun exclusive equipment in this format so she doesn't accidentally empower heroes like Jenua, Bloodblade Karin, or Amiki. Next up, we move on to Infinite Horizon Achates, who is an amazing answer to New Moon Luna as well as Harsetti in general, by building her insanely tanky with a decent amount of speed on Guardian Ice Crystals or another healing artifact. She can cycle incredibly fast, help keep your team topped off, and provide you with a ton of CR in order to actually kind of out-tempo your team. If your opponent has a move with a bunch of debuffs and they press, well then you can Tinder swipe it away with her S3 and hopefully give your team some super powerful buffs to turn the tide and completely win that game full stop. Next up, the second to last character we're going to talk about in this video is Veronica. She is a free-to-play character that completely destroys immortality characters like Bloodblade Karin, Jenua, or the next character we're going to be talking about, Inheritor Amiki, for free. If you don't have her, stop the video right now, go clear chapter 4 of episode 5 of Adventure, and build her. You literally have zero excuse to not build this character in your roster, right? She is free for everyone, and not building her is going to make your climb so much harder because Bloodblade Karin's, Amiki's, Jenua's, they are everywhere on the ladder. And finally, the last character to talk about is Inheritor Amiki. She's basically Bloodblade Karin's little sister, Bloodblade Karin number 2. She's incredibly strong versus cleave and aggro compositions with a incredibly easy brain dead play pattern. You only skill 1 wound with the unit whenever it's her turn, unless she's at 1 HP with immortality, in which case you press S3, put on her Air Jordans, dunk somebody, take an extra turn, then S1, whoever has the lowest amount of HP, and then do it again next turn. Since she's a free 3-star, she's super easy to build and one of the best heroes in the format. She is a no-brainer must build for all players, in my opinion. And there you have it. That is going to be the down and dirty cheat sheet for you turn 2 players out there. If I missed anything or you have any questions, again, let me know down in the comment section below. Hopefully this was some help to you. Please let me know if this helped you get your Pirate Captain Flan skin. I hope you enjoy it, and hopefully I'll be able to make another one of these next season. As always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Later now.